Hey everybody, welcome to Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry podcast series hosted by yours truly, Dave Procida. Thanks for joining us today. The purpose of the podcast is simple. We want to help everyone from owner to intern understand the industry better so you can make the best decisions about where you want to go and how you want to get there. Now today, we're going to do an interview with an old friend who's got almost 4 decades in the commercial exterior wall business. He is the Vice President of Building Envelope Solutions at Benson. And I want to welcome Jeff Heymann to our podcast. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me today.
I want to say something now. You're the first guy on this podcast to wear a tie, but you look great. I got to tell you that.
Well, David, we know that you have a reputation in the industry for sartorial splendor. So I felt it was only... I had to at least try to meet that level if I could. So thank you.
You've done an excellent job.
I haven't worn a tie in so long, I almost forgot how to tie a tie. But
there you go. Well, again, welcome. I'm happy that you were able to join us today. Before we get into the nuts and bolts and your story, talk about Benson and where they are in the market, what they do for those that might not know.
Sure. So Benson actually is celebrating our 96th year in business, based in Portland, Oregon. And for many years, like many businesses, they were a contract glazer in the Northwest. And then beginning in the early 80s, management at the time, Lou Niles, decided to sort of branch out and adopt some early unitization principles, started hiring an engineering staff and grew the business, did some work in Asia. And then I think for the last 20, 25 years, we've been consistently one of the largest facade contractors in North America, doing work all over the U.S., primarily on the East and West Coast in major markets. Today, we've got over 600 employees. We have a large manufacturing facility in Mexico, over 300,000 square feet, where we do most of our fabrication. We've also got a large regional fabrication presence in the Northwest, both in Portland and Seattle. And then we've got project management offices in major markets that we do business in. So I think our reputation is, I think we're regarded as one of the best, if not the best facade contractors. Not the largest, never have wanted to be the largest, just really have a real focus on trying to do things really well and doing things with quality. And integrity is a word that everybody throws around, but there's a real integrity that runs through the DNA at Benson.
Well, for those of you who don't know, just look at One World Trade in New York. That facade was done by your company, and we'll talk about several others, what I call iconic jobs around the country and actually around the world. So you're the VP of Building Envelope Solutions. What does that mean today for you? What do you do today?
So today, Dave, so we, all of estimating and all of design and all of the pre-construction rolls up to me. So really the idea of, business acquisition and going about getting that acquisition, going about getting projects. Why are we looking at projects? What projects are we chasing? That's really the primary focus. Additionally, I think you're going to touch on it, but Benson was acquired by MiTek, which is about a $2 billion enterprise based in St. Louis, primarily focused in on building components. But MiTek has a real interest in advancing offsite construction going into the future. And so what that may mean and how Benson and some of the expertise that we bring, being in prefabricated wall solutions for many years, and how we can help drive that business initiative is also something that I spend a fair amount of time with now.
So you used the word influencer before we went on air, and I think that's that says it well. You can influence, and that it's got to be a good thing. Now, you were bought by MiTek, who was a huge company. You said $2 billion, Berkshire Hathaway owned, and they've opened up, I'm sure, other doors not only for the company but for you personally, right?
We were talking about this as well. So what's interesting is, well, first of all, they're a great parent. If you look at some of the other acquisitions in our business, whether it be venture capital or whether it be an offshore company, the fact that we were acquired by a really solid American-owned company that also has roots deep with Berkshire Hathaway. Now we're just a very small portion of the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio, but the idea that Berkshire has as far as solid companies buying and holding, that enables us downstream as Benson to know that we've got a secure future. We've got people that will listen to us. If there is an occasional hiccup along the way, we don't have stockholders that are screaming for somebody's head. So it gives us the financial stability we need and the strength that we need, especially to continue to look at large, iconic projects. But we can do it at a nice pace, and there has not been sort of the demands that maybe a different type of parent might have on us.
Yep, understood. So before we get into the evolution of curtain wall and how it went from the early days to where it is now, you even mentioned off-site construction. That's been kind of common within your business for years. What about you? How did you get into this business?
I'm probably the least likely person to be in construction that you'd ever find. I was I still have to hire a handyman to do most of the work around the house. But I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I went to college in Cleveland. I thought I was going to end up a lawyer, and my father passed away. I took a year off of school. I went back home to work a little bit. I ended up coaching football for a short time. That's where, you and I have talked about the fact we both have that commonality in our background with the coaching aspect. Thought I might be a football coach. And at that point, I decided to not go to law school and just to go get a job somewhere. And so at the time, there was a glass fabrication company in Jamestown, New York, about 90 miles southwest of Buffalo, called Faulkner Glass Industries. And I drove down there and I interviewed, and they liked me, and they called me back for a second interview, and they hired me, and I never looked back, and through the twists and turns. So I started really for a small glass fabricator back in 1984.
Wow. We say this all the time, us guys that are a little bit older, but it's not so much, you didn't have a master plan, you got a job. But one thing you did, I'm sure, maybe you can attest to this, is you worked hard. You were good at what you did. You separated yourself from others. People recognized that in you and supported you because you helped them get where they wanted to go as well, right? Would you say that's true?
I mean, that sounds a little egotistical, but yeah, and obviously I've got a great support system. I had wonderful parents and wonderful family and friends that, helped me develop as a human being. But yeah, I think so, Dave. There's been a certain work ethic in our family, and with all of, I have two other brothers, and I'm the black sheep of the family. I have a brother who's managing partner of a law firm. I have another brother who's lieutenant colonel in the Army. So whatever stuff we got, whether it was environment or genetics, probably a little bit of both, has helped. And so, but that's where you can help people. Not everybody has that. So, as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm very cognizant of trying to help some of the younger people in our organization and try to show them the right way to do things. And I'll use another sports analogy. The guys like Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods are fantastic, right? But most of the people on the PGA Tour, they call them grinders, right? You just got to keep grinding, right? You just got to just got to get up and down.
That's a great analogy. I love that. Now, you did play D3 sports, right?
I did. I played college football.
Yeah, and you were probably a DB, right?
I was. Yeah, I'm not. Not being the biggest guy in the world.
So, I played basketball in D3 as well, and certainly I wasn't a number 5. Let's just say that.
As I like to say, Dave, I'm not very tall, but I was slow too.
There you go. So you spent some time in the New York City area after your first gig. When did you end up with Flower City? Because that's where I first heard your name.
Yeah, so I had started in the glass business. I was in the Midwest for the first 7 or 8 years of my career. My family's from the East. I had just taken a job with another company. They were looking for someone in New York. They had 2 good candidates in Chicago. I said, well, look, why don't you hire the other candidate for Chicago, and I'll move to New York because I want to move to New York. So they moved me to New York, and they fired me a month after I moved to New York. So
it was that good, huh?
I'm in New York now. That's good. I don't have a job, but I'm here. And then I went to work for another company for just a year, and then a year later, another recruiter approached me and about Flower City, and I had known about Flower City being in the glass business, but hadn't really met anybody. And so again, serendipity, sometimes just being in the right place at the right time when an opportunity presents itself. Again, drove out to Long Island, had an interview. It just so happened that a guy named John Stevens, who was VP of sales, was retiring. They had a young kid, Mike Russo, who they were elevating. Mike, and Mike and I are about the same age, and so here I am, 30 years old, interviewing with Mike Russo, who's 30 years old, and we hit it off, and then so as Mike was elevated to VP of sales, I was replacing him as the sort of the Eastern regional sales manager, and then had a great opportunity at Flower City to really delve into what I still am doing today, which is custom high-rise curtain wall for the most part, and be able to learn from people that had grown up in that business, like Roger Albright, who was our director of engineering, and some of the field guys, and then most notably Oscar Drucker, who was the president of Flower City, and going back to what we talked about earlier about helping young people, I can remember the first week that I was at Flower City, and I may have known a little bit about glass, but didn't know much about the aluminum framing and how Flower City operated. Oscar had me sit in on every meeting, and would ask me questions. And so just, the opportunity to just be exposed to some of the higher level conversations that were being had was really important. And I haven't lost that. It hasn't been lost on me.
So, and I recognize that Oscar was a heck of a guy, tremendous businessman. He had a presence about him. I know the first big job I got in New York, was Equitable Towers, and that was before you got there. But I remember getting the contract and almost falling into tears because it was almost $500,000 at the time. That was like, oh my God. I was an independent contractor dealing with it. So I met him the first time down in Miami at Saknowski's, and I walked in there looking like you. I had a jacket and tie on. Oscar was in there with, like normal work clothes. And I said, okay, I'll be back in a half an hour. I turned around and went and got changed. But Flower City was, they're a great company. They were a great company. So, and that is another important thing that we try and talk to folks about. Look, you got fired in a month for whatever reason, right? That's forced change. That wasn't your decision, but you dealt with it, right? But where one door closes, the old cliche, another one opens, if you're looking for it, and obviously you did. So when did you get with Benson?
So I had left Flower City. Flower City, Oscar had left. Flower City, it was changing. I had an opportunity to go to work with a couple of guys locally in the New York area in a little bit different field, and that ended up not ending up great. But again, one door opens and closes, the other one happens. So during that time, we were approached to see if we would be interested in bidding on a curtain wall project. Now we were a small curtain wall contractor and window contractor, and it was with Gene and Eric McGovern, who had just come back from England. And Gene McGovern, is Lair McGovern, and Lair McGovern Bovis, now Bovis, now Bovis Lend-Lease, and now Lend-Lease. So that whole thing, and Eric's about my age now too. Gene passed away unfortunately a few years ago. Another iconic figure, if you ever had a chance to meet Gene McGovern, right out of Central Casting, if you want to look at it.
Yeah, out of New York.
Yeah, real character. So, so we were approached by them, and I knew that the McGoverns had known Lou, or knew Lou Niles, and in the meantime, some of the people at Flower City had gone to work at Benson. I called up Lou Niles one day and I said, "Why haven't you ever done any work in New York?" And Lou said, "Because I haven't wanted to." I said, "Good." And so we talked about this little project that we were looking at, and they were looking for a custom facade solution, and we didn't have a good supplier for it. And so we talked about whether we could maybe partner up. And so this had to be 1998, I want to say. And he said, "I'm going to be in New York in a couple of weeks. Why don't we meet for lunch and we can talk a little bit?" And we had met briefly once when I was at Flower City and he was at Benson competing on a project, I believe in the Philippines. So I actually had met him in the Philippines once. And so anyway, we had lunch, we talked. He said, "Let's try it." And from there, we developed a relationship. We did 2 projects together. And then we helped. I was still my own company, but we were going through some challenges. We had 4 partners, and there was some dissension there. And I went to Lou and I said, I think this thing's gonna go south here quickly. And Benson had just acquired the contract for the facade for the New York Times building. And I said, now that you're established, this will be your 3rd project in New York. You're going to need to open up an office. Why don't you let me open the office for you? And he said, "Okay, send me what you're thinking. Send me a little business plan, and then come out to Portland and we'll talk." And so we did that. And me and another gentleman, Joe Anderson, and Joe's our regional manager in New York for Benson now. And a few weeks later, we were faxed an offer. So, still using fax machines, right? So faxed an offer. And so that was 2003, when that happened. So been with Benson formally so I went from being sort of Lou's strategic partner in New York to being his employee, and enjoyed every moment of that. And then over the years, we grew the business in New York to be, where we were doing a lot of work and became a part of the New York construction market. And then after we were acquired by MiTek, and after Lou retired, MiTek asked me if I wanted to move to Portland to take on a more of a national leadership role. And at the time, Lance Howard, who's my boss now, was actually had just accepted coming in, replacing Lou and his predecessor, who didn't last very long. And so I said, "Yeah, I'd love to come in and help Lance run the business." I don't know how much help I give Lance, but it sounded good at the time. But so Lance and I actually started, and I think today, David, might be just within a few days of our 5-year anniversary of Lance coming to work for Benson, and for me moving from New York to the beautiful Portland, Oregon. So
well,
happy 5-year anniversary for us.
congratulations on both counts. You've been with Benson et al. For over 17 years now and 5 years in Portland, which is really cool. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to ask Jeff about really, I think, something that's very interesting, and that's the evolution of the exterior envelope. So we'll see you in a minute.
Hi, I'm Patrick Ripple, founding partner of ISA Architectural. I've known that chap right there for well over 20 years.
And what a 20 years it's been. I'm Larry Windsor, partner, vice president of construction services. Our third partner, Mike Morehouse, can't be with us today.
We are the Mid-Atlantic's premier sales force for architectural building products and engineered architectural solutions. For over 15 years, we have been providing comprehensive design solutions to architects and designers all across this region, and high-quality economic product solutions to contractors and subcontractors too.
We bring products and people together. We specialize in the building envelope, everything from the weather barrier all the way out to different types of cladding. We fully understand the rain screen principle, and we have an interior portfolio specializing in wood and metal walls and ceilings.
If you're a developer, part of a design team, architect, or interiors, or if you're a contractor, let us help you.
Visit www.isaarchitectural.com and see how we can bring value to your project.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry podcast series. We're happy and fortunate to have with us Jeff Heymann, who is the Vice President of Building Envelope Solutions for Benson. Jeff, we talked about Benson and you personally and your history. Let's talk about the curtain wall, or let's even make it broader, the building envelope history, the evolution of it. And go back as far as you want, but let's take it from where it was, where it is today, and kind of why, right?
Well, David, you got a few years on me, so you may have a little more knowledge.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'm kidding. As I think, as I understand it, beginning in the mid '80s, the idea of unitization came upon, and some of it was I think at the time it was really a response to the fact that labor was getting very expensive, especially in the Northeast. But also I think the technology developed so that people understood how they could nest frames together. We were talking earlier that Benson had the privilege of reskinning the UN Secretariat building about 10 years ago. But one of the challenges was to make it as close to the original Corbusier design as possible, which originally was double hung windows offset, but those sort of double hung glaze or offset glazing at least. But that offset glazing, they had actually tried to prefabricate that and nest those frames together. They just did a very poor job of it. The idea was there, they just didn't know how to execute it very well. But they were also limited as to what materials they had. They didn't have silicone. They didn't have insulated glass. They only had anodized framing for aluminum. So at the time, they had some products that really weren't suitable for longevity. So fast forward, our challenge, and that was Bob Heinches, who's the consultant, but Bob actually was the architect of record. So Bob came up with a design that we sort of took to its logical conclusion as to how to make that original Corbusier design, including dimensionally accurate, and even trying to get the color of the original Solex green glass, even though we weren't going to use 3/8 Solex green glass, we were going to use insulated glass like low E, and how to do all that. And so that's really just the fact that the business had evolved to the point where we could make it work. We could execute better on the design, on the idea. So I think though, when I joined Flower City in 90, whatever year it was, 91, we were focused on unitized curtain wall. All of it was unitized curtain wall. And I think in parallel on the West Coast, Lieu, Niles, and Benson were the early adopters of unitized curtain wall on the West Coast. And, when I started, and we didn't bump into each other as competitors that often, every once in a while we would. but talking to some of the guys that have been here a long time, by the early to mid 90s, Benson was at least the major project side, because we still maintain a very robust sort of contract glazing business here, where we do stick systems and storefronts and windows and glass replacement. But on the major project side, by the mid 90s, it was full bore unitization, and anything that was stick built. If it was outside of the Pacific Northwest, we weren't going to chase it.
But I agreed, and I want to make it clear that before that, because we who are in the exterior wall business take it for granted, we understand what unitized is versus stick built. But I remember when I started in New York as an insulation contractor, right? Curtain wall insulation, fire containment, everything was stick built, and I had jobs all up and down the city, because nobody wanted to do what we were doing. But then Glass Saloon Company out of Miami, Elliot and the crew, Renato and all those guys, they came into downtown Manhattan with a unitized system, and it changed my business for sure. The unions didn't like it. That part of prefabrication is the desire not to change by certain sectors, and the unions are one of them. They broke a lot of glass on that job, but they had composite crews, stone derrick men, glazers, ornamental iron workers. It was, but it was change in progress. It changed my business dramatically. So, but it had to happen. And for those reasons you said, and it was really a financial decision at the time. Today, we're going to get into it, but there's a whole lot more than that in prefab.
So Dave, just going back, it must have affected you a little bit adversely, because now all of that insulation that had been field installed was now being installed in the factory. So
we did? We talked about change the other day in a podcast, and what some is forced. That was forced change. So what we did, instead of insulating it, right, we still had pieces of it to do, but most of it was already built into the unit. But so what do? We got in the erecting business, and it was a tough business. But we were assembling those units. We were assembling in New Jersey, bringing them into New York, and installing them. So you change with change anyway. So now unitized curtain wall is a big thing, which brings us to MiTek and One Wall. MiTek and One Wall. Now this is, why don't you explain what One Wall is?
Yeah, so One Wall is a new product that we rolled out about 6 months ago, and it isn't original thought. I mean, there's you've been doing it in your business. People like Eastern Exterior and Island on the East Coast have been doing it for a while. I think it's more mature for our listeners in the East than it is in the West. Probably just gave somebody an idea to jump into the business now. But when I moved out West, I recognized that a lot of people weren't doing it. The other thing is the West Coast is really leading the way with energy code. The strictest markets for energy are Seattle and Portland, and even California now. Even though the climate there is relatively mild, the energy code there is pretty strict. So but nationally, what energy code is doing is, vision and opaqueness are in conflict, right? And so the ratio of window to wall, right, or glass to wall is a consideration on every project. So recognizing that there's a lot of opaque surfaces or more opaque surfaces. And of course, we have opaque surfaces in all glass curtain walls with spandrel glass, but architecture wants to change and things want to change. And recognizing that a lot of people were looking at different opaque materials, different rain screen cladding, but we're still faced from a quality perspective with the same issues that curtain wall might have had 50 years ago, which were sort of in situ, stick built, with a variety of trades. You have a carpenter, you have a waterproofer, you have a sheet metal worker, you have your glazer come in and put your windows in, and who knows what else. You've got equipment on the exterior of the building. So the idea of prefabricating a mega panel or a larger panel, but using curtain wall technology, and especially unitized curtain wall technology with pressure equalization principles, with dual gasketing, with redundant water control, with logical draining solutions, had some appeal to us. And it also had some appeal to our parent company, MiTek, because MiTek has really been focused in on enabling and advancing off-site construction through their machinery they build, through some of the products that they manufacture. And so with that, we developed a product called OneWall, which is a cold form steel frame with aluminum, with curtain wall extrusions. And again, I think looking at the product and talking to people that have looked at it, they like the improvements that we made, and even you say change, we've rolled out the first sort of model, and we've already recognized that we need to roll out a different model. We need to tweak a few things and change a few things to respond to architecture, to respond to some other things that we weren't quite aware of at the time. But OneWall is a really interesting product. We've sold our first two projects on the West Coast, one in San Francisco, one in Seattle. And we've got plans to stay pretty much in the West for now, but obviously as we look to increase sales and increase revenue, we're going to need to find ways to grow the business, both within our traditional markets here in the West, and then also regionally be able to grow it. So we're it's sort of in its infancy. We don't have to grow it exponentially. But I think what we're doing with it is a little different than what a lot of people that maybe have come at it from the framing side are doing with it. I mean, clearly putting together a cold form steel frame is going to save you time from putting up stud frames and from putting up studs in the field. But the idea that we're coming out with a finished panel that can interlock together, just like a curtain wall, when you start looking at schedule compression on site, smaller amount of people, which translates into less congestion, better safety, all those things. But you're right. But then you still have you've got the pushback from the trades who don't know how to deal with the fact that sometimes are marrying up 3 or 4 different jurisdictions at one time. You've got owners who are just afraid of the newness. You've got architects who don't understand that they may have to accept certain things in order to get better quality, and so but that's been the universal challenge anyway, right? It's always been that way. So
it is. And I'm dealing with a company on the East Coast that roll forms their own steel and creates infill panels, right? Now you're talking about mega panels in there. I love mega panels because you can put any facade on it you want, right? And your gasketing system is great. See, from somebody looking at your website, and I'm trying to put myself in an architect or owner's position, I say I love it because I know Benson and I trust Benson. I trust their technology. So I'm not going to be too concerned about the technology that they move toward this OneWall system, right? But there's, for your company to be able to scale it, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, over time, that's an issue you're going to have to deal with. And the main thing, without giving away any of your secrets, you got to be competitive too, right? So you're still going to have owners that don't understand how you monetize schedule savings. Well, you do. I mean, you can open early, you can have less general condition all kinds of stuff, right? Which we know. And by the way, you forgot one thing: lean building practices. That's another one. So we sell the same thing, but off-site construction is huge. What you can't do with an infill panel that we make is that you can't really put, you can put subframing on it maybe, but you're not going to put the facade on it. So you're still going to have to get outside the building. Haven't figured that one out yet, but you have, and companies like Eastern and Island have done it too. Now, the only difference is typically you'll install one wall by elevation, I would think.
You can do either or. So logistics ends up being one of the biggest challenges, right? Logistics are always a big challenge. In an urban setting, they're very difficult. In a cornfield, they're not so difficult.
No problem.
So a lot of it has to do with hook time and when is it being done. But we do have the option to go either elevation by elevation or floor by floor. There are still advantages doing floor by floor because obviously then the construction manager can, just like curtainwall, can bring in his other trades and start the dance up the building. The choreography, as I call it, right?
Yep.
And everybody's got to be stepping up together.
Yep. But if you ring the building, you can do that. And by the way, I want to make an offer because you're such a good guest, that if you really if you want some insight into slab to slab construction, which may be something you could promote, I got you covered.
Okay.
Anyway, we're going to take another short.
I haven't showed you our developments yet, Dave. So but I'm sure I would love to. I'd love to get your comments on it. So
would love
after this conversation. Yeah.
Would love to look. So we're going to take another short break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about an array of things, including technology and how it's changing construction. So we'll see you all in a quick minute. Hey, everybody. If you're looking for a strategic business partner who does subcontracting work on the interiors, let me tell you about the CFP Group. They are a minority business enterprise and have been in business for over 20 years. If you're interested, you can contact them by email at cfpgroup1@gmail.com or call them directly at 410-977-8568. That's 410-977-8568. Take it from me. I've done business with them, and I know they can get the job done. Welcome back, everybody. We're here with Jeff Heymann of Benson, and let's talk about, Jeff, technology, because we're both talking about offsite construction, and it's been around forever. You mentioned a job that it really didn't work, even though they tried it. But how has technology impacted the business over the years, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, so technology can be, incremental technology and thermal breaks, and in our profession, or silicone, or better glass products. But I think everybody is really trying to see how software can help, whether it's a BIM or AI or robotics, as you mentioned earlier, how that can help construction in general. Even the little things like the way that we get drawings these days with all the cloud-based file sharing is such a big departure from the way we did things. But what else is it doing, and how that dovetails into project management software, and how that can dovetail into manufacturing. So for us, as part of MiTek, which has a huge software component to a lot of their businesses, that's really key. Is how can we leverage that resource that we have to help ourselves, but also help our customers. The idea of enabling our customers to build better. We don't have to necessarily manufacture a product. At Benson, we manufacture a product, but I can see a future where there might be ways where we're enabling people to either build with our technology, or provide solutions that enable them to build better walls, better roofs, better interior walls. Could be a lot of different things like that. Could be truly volumetric modular construction, which is an interesting sort of subgroup of prefabrication that we've got some people involved with that right now within MiTek, and it crosses over into the Benson brand. So I think those things are really exciting. I'll be on a beach somewhere by the time those things really get fully done. But that's where everybody's, and talking to some of our customers, they also recognize that. And So I think some of the forward-thinking general contractors and owners are really trying to be partners in that in sort of developing that field further along.
Well, you might be on a beach, Jeff, but you'll have sunglasses that actually enable you to look at somebody you're talking to about business, if I know you.
I was at Best Buy a couple weeks ago and I happened to see that. It's pretty wild. It's like those new glasses.
Technology is such a fast-paced, changing element of all business, of life, right? And a fellow and I were talking the other day. I went back to 1985 when I got my first fax machine. That's technology, right? And you remember Couples Products out of St. Louis?
Of course.
The first fax I ever sent was to Couples, and they sent back a detail. And I'm like, this is great, the cell phones, and now it's ridiculous.
It's just phenomenal.
So here's a question for you that. It's not a very, it's an interesting question, difficult sometimes to ask, but failure in commercial envelope business, in particular the curtain wall business. I've seen so many companies get intoxicated with the unit prices and the fast growth and everything. They outgrew. Well, why is that? Do you agree with it, first of all? And secondly, if so, why?
Well, I agree. There's been a lot of failure in facade business. I think if you talk to the Aons of the world and the AIGs, the fact that the facade contractor rate of default is such a higher percentage versus a lot of other trades. I think it's a fact. I believe that some of the reasons are, putting aside bad business decisions or all of that. I believe if you look at where facades are in relationship to all of the other trades, right? There's foundations, there's structure, and then you got to get the facade. And the building cannot really proceed without the building being weathered in. So any mistake, any hiccup in supply chain, anything that happens to disrupt what is supposed to be that schedule has ripple effects all the way down the line. And I think that's so we're sort of we're at the nexus of the building being able to really go, right? So I think that's one aspect of it. I do believe the other aspect of it really, and not only rocket science is rocket science, and facades is not rocket science, but facades are challenging. Keeping air and water out is very, very difficult, and you're dealing with building tolerances, and you have to design for those, and you have to design for mistakes, human error in the field. And so, and you're interfacing with roofs and with soffits and with other things. So I just think that inherently it's a very, very difficult part of the building to get right. And I think it's undervalued how difficult it is. That's easy for me to say because I'm involved in it every day. But when you look and you see a challenging design and our customers are only giving us a couple of weeks to bid it when it really needs twice as much time, or you've got owners who are looking for a better price, so there's people that are jumping into it, and that's in all businesses. But if drywall is put in wrong, you can pull out drywall and you can have new drywall delivered the next day. If we've misfabricated a curtain wall panel, it's not showing up tomorrow. Yep. So then how does that affect the project until that panel finally gets there? I think that's regardless those factors, I think, create a tremendous amount of potential risk.
Especially if you make a mistake. A mistake, like you said, in prefab, we refab. No big deal. But when you're talking about a long lead time item, an engineered system like you're talking about, it can be disaster. So, and again, I think folks get hung up on the ability to go from 5 million to 20 million in a year. And that's tough to catch up with because, as you said, 90% of the work is typical. It's that 10%, man, that can kill you, right?
Yeah, and for a small business or a business that's growing, I mean, and that's all contracting, right? It's still cash flow to a large degree, and we work in a business where you're getting 90 cents on your dollar, and you're at your last 10% is at the mercy of a lot of people and a lot of things. And again, and you've got the labor component, and if you miss, your labor gets paid every Thursday, and whether your estimate was right or wrong, your cash on the barrel had every Thursday on that side of it. So, and that's every trade, but productivity can be affected, and therefore, labor becomes a variable cost if you don't manage it properly.
One thing I like about the exterior wall business, be it curtain wall or opaque walls, as you had cold form metal framing, is the material to labor ratio is much better than, let's say, the drywall business. It's maybe 65-35, and it's the opposite of the drywall business. And manpower is so hard. And you said it, you get 90 cents on a dollar when you invoice it, and if you're lucky, you'll get it 60 days after you bill for it. So, listen, Jeff, where do you think the industry is going, the commercial construction, over the next 5 or 10 years?